Hey folks, it's Daniel Rashid. Thanks for tuning in again. How do you get started investing into a multi-unit, or how do you evaluate even single family homes when you're looking to purchase and rent out or make some income off of them? Even if it's a good rule of thumb to do that before you even purchase anything for that matter, in case you got to go anywhere, live somewhere else, can you rent that place? Can it support itself as an investment? So stay tuned. All right, you're just about to get into the investing game, or you want to evaluate a single family home in terms of, can you get. Whoa, calm. All right, so you're starting to get it. Hello, just say hi. Okay? Calm down. This is Novo. He's saying hi to everybody. He's my partner in crime sometimes. Okay, you good to chill? Just go relax. Okay, you're just about to start getting into the investing game, and you want to evaluate a single family home possibly for your own purchase, or maybe you want to rent that out per room, or maybe you're looking to do an Airbnb or a multi-unit. Where do you get started? How do you evaluate the numbers and make it so that it's sort of a workflow, so that you're not wasting too much time with properties that don't matter. I'm going to run through a little application I've used. I used to use DealCheck. Now I've been suggested by one of my fellow YouTubers actually to try DealCrunch. So I'm going to take a stab at that and try DealCrunch and evaluate a possible local deal here if the numbers are there. Unfortunately, what I've noticed a lot of the time, not in my listings, but other realtors won't advertise the rental rates for their listings. I don't know why. I think that's very important for any investor, just to have those numbers to quickly evaluate it and not waste your time in terms of a realtor or for sale by owner. You're selling your investment. Put those numbers out there. It doesn't have to include names and all that. Protect the identity of your tenancy until later on in a purchase process where you got to present leases, and such. But from the onset, exposing your numbers is not a bad thing, and it really, it's going to be a lot less wasted time in terms of folks just coming in, evaluating, and walking away if it's not interest to them. So having the numbers up front in your listing cut, or if you're advertising your own listing, then just having the numbers available for folks to evaluate their own investment is probably a smart and good thing. All right, so in terms of a purchase price, you're going to be looking at, whatever home that you're desiring. You're going to need a few things to start out. What's the, obviously your purchase price is going to reflect everything. So you could be reserved on that. You could use their asking price. You could use their asking price, evaluate it, and then, reevaluate it at a different price to see, hey, if I get this property for $550 instead of $600, it's going to be producing good numbers. Obviously, it would be better, but numbers that would sustain itself. You want to stay up in your cap rates, and I'll explain later what that is. But in terms of your percentage, you want to stay a little bit high. It would be worthwhile to at least entertain a 6% or up cap rate. I know folks sometimes do 4 or 5%, but there's a lot of unknowns with property, especially. You'll notice once you start doing this, older properties will produce better cap rates, but your older properties also have, red flags that could come along. It could be problems with the foundation. It's an old building, so things can happen with older properties. But the cash on cash is really good for those old properties. So, especially my local district, I would be buying. That's another thing in terms of location where you're buying. Everyone says, "Hey, location." You've heard it before. It's like, it drive you crazy how much times you hear that, but it is very true in terms of investing and rentals. How much is that location desired? Check your local Kijiji, Craigslist, whatever, rental platforms that folks use in your area, possibly Facebook. I see a lot of that on there. See what these units are renting for. That's a huge part of everything. What are you getting, for your rents? What's reasonable? Evaluate what's reasonable. You probably are renting yourself. You would understand firsthand what's reasonable. what's acceptable, you know, in terms of what people will pay for, and because a lot of your numbers is going to go based off of your assumption of what, you know, what rents you can get at the end of the day. So, and to that point, I should say, if the property is listed for a certain price and it's getting a certain rent, that's the numbers you use. Don't forecast what you can get. Sure, there's different calculations or calculators to say, hey, you know, I can probably get this for the building. You can use that to possibly motivate you to purchase a property, but don't just project foolish numbers thinking that you're going to get those for rents. Now more than ever, there's a housing crisis pretty much across the country, pretty much in the US, and probably likely across the world, of, you know, folks being overcharged for rents, problem with rentals, illegal rentals, and landlords just shooting up the rent for no reason. So be very careful where your approach is. Possibly you get away with it, sometimes you won't, and you'd get stomped and have to pay all that money back, and that's your income. And then you're left with an investment, not only stomped in terms of, you know, your high rents being halted, but you having to pay back and then forced to rent a unit for a certain rate for an X amount of years. You know, your local governing bodies have a lot of power. Be sure to educate yourself on what kind of power they have and do it right. You know, at the end of the day, do it right. So if you're buying something, the purchase price and the rents as is where you should be calculating from. And unfortunately, with things the way they are now, it leaves you pretty narrow in terms of what you can buy that makes sense. So you have to be realistic on, you know, what's available to you, because at the end of the day, there may not be much available once you start calculating these investments. So if you need to use those potential rents, just do it carefully in terms of, like, you know, being realistic on time frames if you have to improve rents, because you're dealing with people, you're dealing with tenancy, and you want to be compassionate. You don't want to develop a reputation to be a complete, you know what, when it comes to being a landlord. And the whole idea of landlord is a very aggressive in terms of the way that sounds. You know, you almost want to work in synergy with your tenants. I wasn't going to discuss all this on this video, but we might as well talk about it, because you're going to, you know, eventually, if you're calculating for yourself or your own home, if you're looking at renting or renting at some sorts or some capacity, you're going to be a landlord yourself and an owner of your property and renting your property out. Working with people is not just numbers game. It's not a calculated sort of thing. Sure, the numbers are calculated, but, like, you know, people are people, and you need to treat them as such. And you have to have compassion in your heart when you're dealing with folks. And sure, things are unfair in some situations, but at the end of the day, they're living in your place, and they can do a lot more damage than good in your place if you ruffle the feathers too much, or you want to take a stand. And not to be like that, but being a little bit diplomatic in your approach and dealing with tenancy is a much better, will net you a much better result than being aggressive and, you know, sort of the stereotypical landlord that you see a lot of, and victim and being aggressive. And it's not a smart business practice. There's much better ways to deal with people, and communication is the absolute key on most of those fronts, where you can communicate with your tenant, you know, to figure out, you know, where, you know, what their desires are, and try to work with them in terms of finding a win-win where both parties are left happy, you know, at the end of the day. And that might take some push and pull, and at the end of the day, sometimes it's not too much. And the mountain of issues that you could build with being aggressive with people is far more daunting and time consuming than it would be just to walk around the mountain and work with that tenant and see, what you both can do to sort of mend that relationship if it's gotten sour. That's just a tip. You don't have to do anything that I'm telling you to do. These are all just my opinions in terms of how I approach things. That's netted me great results I've been burnt in my rentals, of course. That's going to happen because, you know, some folks take advantage, and that's unfortunate. But extending that hand out, being the first to at least trust, is an important part of rental and working with people. They burn you, then you know you put them on your list, not to deal with them again, and you get burned. But the the gain that you would gain from greater folk that are dealing with you on a good manner is that you'll net the reward of that. It's just much better. Okay, so rest of the video, I'm going to get into that Deal Crunch application I'm talking about, and we're going to hammer in some numbers on a particular property. Okay, so I am going to do a property we have locally here. 143 NASA Street. It's current listing that we have in town here. So I'm going to be punching this in. There we go. Okay, this property is a multi-unit in a pretty decent area. It's got, I don't know how many bedrooms we got. It doesn't really matter. We got 4 units. So let's say it's 8 bedrooms respectively. Probably 4 bathrooms. All this stuff doesn't really square feet. It's probably to get 4 units out of that. They're definitely not 3,000, but 3,000. That building looks old. It's got wood shingles, asphalt roof. 1970. That's a guess. Is there a date here? No date. That's typical. You'll get that a lot. I'm not going to bother with the MLS number. Sometimes it messes things up on this application. I already tried it. So 0.28 is the lot size. Acres like 43,000 square feet. So we're just going to say about maybe like 11,000 square feet. I don't know if it has a sign. It's definitely, oh, you don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if it has a fireplace basically. So we're just gonna say it's a multi-unit. So mixed use residential. Let's say if that's okay. Flooring, all that jazz. I'm just gonna keep going. Can I skip that? Good. All right, here's the nitty gritty stuff. So purchase price. Right now it's listed at $729,900. Now that's a round number. Likely some room there because no one prices like that without some room. After repair value, I'm not going to do anything to this. Interest only loan, we're not going to bother with that because that's usually a bad call and hard to get. Interest only, it's basically just you're just paying interest, no mortgage or principal on your mortgage payment. You're not paying down the principal, so you're just paying interest, and that's great if you're going to flip a property, turn it around. In this day and age, unless you're doing the carpentry and construction and have most of the material, flipping is very difficult and should be handled very sensitively, unless you have a very rehab property that maybe you got in an auction, which is hard to get because you need all the cash and it's big time risk. But unless you can get a property for a decent price, I wouldn't bother. Down payment, it's a 4 unit, so you're likely looking at 10% if you're lucky. We're gonna have to say at least 20% down. You might get away with 10%. Okay, fine. Let's stick with 10% just to keep it realistic. Interest rate these days, I hop over to like RateHub. It gives you a good idea. RateHub.ca. I flick over to mortgages and see kind of like what you're dealing with rates. 5-year fixed rates, probably. And they're very decent. You know, some of the A lenders, so the big banks, Bank of Montreal, CIBC, they seem to be at the top of this list right now. Likely being sponsored or something on that site, but they're doing 2.37. That's on a residential rate. 4 units are usually, they're still considered residential, so you might be able to get away with that. Your loan term, likely doing 25 years. And the mortgage insurance on the 10%, so the, goodness, what would that be these days? It's probably like a 2.3% insurance value. That's your CMHC fee for the extra 10%. The bank will give you 80%. You gotta go to CMHC and get that cleared for the extra 10%. The buildings like a real dive, they probably won't fund you. But considering this is in a good area, there won't be any problem doing that. So likely a 2% thing. Could be wrong on that, but we're just gonna run with it. And funding cost, I'm not gonna do anything with this. Okay. Gross monthly rent, 40 grand. Other monthly income, they probably don't have coin laundry. Sometimes you can charge parking if you're right downtown. Likely nothing going on there. And the expenses. Now let's